All right. Okay, so let's get started. So good morning, everyone, and I want to thank you for participating today in our workshop. My name is Cynthia Sheeks, and I'm the Director of Development for Major Gifts at the University of Akron. And I'm also the chair of the IDEA Committee of the Association of Fundraising Professionals for Northeast Ohio chapter. And I would like to thank my committee members who assisted in helping us with today's workshop. And that is Marianne Calvin, Stephanie Koontz, Jess Rist, Karen Herlicka, Andrea Ellis, and Pamela Valentine. Thank you so much for your assistance. We originally had a similar workshop 2 months ago, and it was so successful. We had 70 some attendees, and there were a couple questions that we did not address, and some came in after the workshop. So we decided to host part 2 of the understanding and relating to diverse donors and communities. And our moderator today is Dr. Cristina González Alcalá. She has a PhD in Urban Studies Affairs, and she works at she's Community Investor Officer for Akron Community Foundation. She's also a senior lecturer at the University of Akron and founder of CEO of Not Your Daddy's Mexican Hot Sauce. And I got to try some of that, Cristina. So
I'll hook you up, Cynthia. Thanks, Susan, for the thumbs up. Appreciate it.
So thank you, Ann. I'm turning it over to you. I do want to mention that you can ask questions in the chat. If we have time, we will get to them. And also, this webinar will be recorded. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Well, let me do, before we do a quick introduction of our panels, I would like to start us up with a land acknowledgement, if I may. And so I'm actually borrowing this from our dear friend to everybody in Akron, Mr. Akron himself, Dave Lieberth. And so I just want to start by honoring and acknowledging the first people to occupy this land that today we call Akron. The names they used to identify themselves are largely unknown to us, but the Native American nations who were stewards of this land before the arrival of the first Europeans included the Seneca, the Cayuga from the Iroquois Confederacy, the Huron, the Shawnee, the Ojibwe or Chippewa, and the Lenni Lenape, who were called Delaware. We recognize that we owe a debt to these Indian nations who were forcibly removed from the land they sustained for hundreds of years. And I also want to honor the land where I'm from. I'm from Durango, Mexico, land of the Tepehuano people, and my ancestors from Musquis, Coahuila, who are residents of the Kickapoo land. So I've been told, I'm still researching that, but I wanted to put that out there for all of us and honor them and all of our ancestors who were here before. So with that, let me introduce our fabulous panel here. With us today is Amanda Cole, Executive Director from Plexus LGBT Allied Chamber of Commerce. Amanda, she joined Plexus as the first Executive Director in March of 2019. Her work in the nonprofit sector began while a student at Antioch College during her first co-op directing an AmeriCorps program. She received her Master's of Public Administration, woohoo, me too, from Wright State University. She's an avid reader and consumer of podcasts. And Amanda has been most inspired by Encyclopedia Brown to choose her own adventure. And then here we go with Stephanie Koontz. She's the Director of Alumni Relations at Walsh University. Stephanie Koontz leads alumni programming for her alma mater at Walsh University. Through the planning and oversight of strategic events, networking, opportunities, and volunteer programs, she provides opportunities for the university's alumni network of 15,000 plus to stay connected over a lifetime. Stephanie is proud of her Korean American heritage and is an active member of the leadership Stark County Diversity Committee, and the AFP NEO IDEA Committee as well. In 2019, she was honored by the Council for Advancement and Support of Education as a diversity scholar. So thanks for being with us, Stephanie. We also have Debra Valentine-Gray. She's the Director of Regional Advancement at Indiana University, or sorry, now retired, right, Debra? Thank you. She is nationally recognized as a fundraising leader and a subject matter expert in diverse philanthropy and inclusion. Recently retired as the Director of Regional Advancement for Indiana University of Pennsylvania. She was responsible for corporate and foundation relations. She has received numerous awards in her lifetime, including the 2014 Women of Achievement, 2013 New Pittsburgh Courier, 15 Women of Excellence, 2014 Women of the Year Award, and 2013 Fearless Diamond Award from IUP's Women Leadership and African American Culture Centers. Rock on, Debra. Thank you for being here with us. And finally, we have Kasey Willener, Assistant Director of Development at the University of Akron. Kasey joined UA as an Assistant Director of Development in March 2020, found his passion for fundraising while attending Kent State University. Really, Kasey? You went in like that? Okay, that's fine. Where he joined the Kent State Phone Center as a student fundraiser for their annual fundathon. And while attending the university, Kasey served as president of Pride Kent, vice president of the Native American Student Association, and as member of the Student Diversity Action Council. Kasey went on to manage the phonathons of Cleveland State University and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill before returning to Northeast Ohio in his current role. All right, amazing panel here. Excited to get started. So let's jump right into it. To being uncomfortable is the question here at hand. So tell us, and feel free to jump in as you'd like. If you need me to call names, I can do that as well. Tell us about an awkward conversation you might have had with a donor when there was money on the line. Tell us about that experience. Did you speak up, stay silent, and how do you manage that relationship?
Well, if everybody doesn't mind, I'll go first. First of all, money is always on the line. It is never, whether it's being current money or future money, money is going to always be on the line when you're having these conversations. So you need to always kind of remember that. Yes, I've had the difficult conversations with a donor. And I also had a witness present. I would never have this conversation without somebody else in the room. That way you don't, it just helps you. It just covers your rear end. And how I did it was I framed it by asking him to give me some advice about how to handle a situation. And I told it to him in a story. So I told him the situation in a story. His reaction was priceless when it hit him that I was talking about something he had done. And by the way, it didn't actually happen to me. It happened to someone who was on my team. And I was just discussing it with him and kind of saying, keep your hands to yourself and don't ever do that again. But it is difficult. And I think it's how you handle the situation, how you react, and how you have to just kind of practice it. You have to really make sure that you are, you have all the facts and you're gentle but firm, transparent but clear about what the expected behavior is. And you also have to not be afraid to leave the money on the table. So that's basically it.
Thanks, Deb.
My example was when I was working at an independent school that had changed pretty quickly in the last decade. So it went from being a private school that was predominantly white and wealthy to one that had more class diversity because of a voucher system. And also racially and ethnically had changed so that we had more East Indian families. So we had a larger population of Hindu and Muslim families. And it was with a parent. And so when you're working in independent schools or higher ed, you're working with current students, parents, alumni, you're kind of, in this whole arc of someone's relationship with an organization. And the white parent, who I would say was upper middle class, said to me, said a condescending remark about the other families, something about poor and like, oh, all this, religion, something. And so while we weren't having a donor conversation, what I said could have something to do with whether they kept their children in there, and they had children who were current and had graduated, so they were also a donor. And for me, that often happens because I'm white.
And it's using the right password and stuff.
He says so.
I can go up there after this meeting and take a look at it. Yeah. No,
Jess,
you
you come
should
unmuted.
just be able to like sign out. And
Hey,
Can somebody
Jess,
help
can you
Jess
mute
mute?
your phone? Jess, can you mute your phone? Thank you.
Where we at?
It's okay. It happens. It totally happens. At least you weren't changing your clothes while your video was on. Like, that's worse. That's worse. So what I was saying, like that happens as a white person, people feel like they can say something to me like other white people do. And so it's just pretty common. I was like, well, I don't believe that. I feel like we're stronger because of our diversity. I think that you should get to know these families that maybe you're being judgmental of. Happy to have this conversation with you more, and just kept it moving, and I was like, and also just was like, I'm here to enjoy this open house or whatever it was that we were at. So I think as a white person, it's really important that we can just sometimes say, I don't agree with you. And I'm not here to have that conversation with you.
Personally, working in the phone-a-thon for, 6 years, you'd be surprised at what people are willing to say to somebody they don't know over the phone. So, and they can't even see a lot of the time. So they don't know if I have a vested personal interest in what they may be talking about. And while I won't get into nitty-gritty of some of the certain things that I have been told over the years as a phone-a-thon fundraiser, there are times where, like Debra said, you have to be willing to walk away because you might make the situation worse, especially if you do have a vested interest. Be prepared to hand them off to somebody else. I've handed plenty of people over to my supervisors, or when I was a supervisor, asked my student fundraisers to hand them over to me, or simply just tell them to have a nice day along the way. But as a student, going off of Amanda as well, telling people about the experiences that I had, if they did say something racist or sexist or anti-homophobic, anti-LGBTQ, what have you, taking time to share my experience with them. Well, I think just based on what you said, I think you might be interested in something that I've learned recently or something that I participated in. Making it more personable along the way can be a great aspect in the education of our donors, because money really is always on the line. And if this is something that's going to continue to happen and they feel comfortable talking with you about, you want to make sure that that's out there now.
So I will echo what Debra said earlier, and expressing that money is always on the line, but I think deeper than that, there's always relationships as well. Because again, in order to get that money, you have to earn the respect in that relationship, and those things don't come organically. And so I think my examples, again, working in alumni relations, I'm not on the front lines of fundraising anymore, but I've spent about a decade in fundraising. And I think the example I'd love to share is just with a peer. That, again, they said something that was a blanket statement that was on behalf of all. And truthfully, I sat on it and thought about it for not too long, but, time to digest and let my feelings go aside and really think about, how Debra had stated, how do I want to react to this? And I think so often many folks, and what she was saying, the woman in example was talking about the African-American community, and how as a predominantly white team that we could all be white passing, and we don't have the same instances or experiences that individuals of the African-American community had. And so I thought about it and I was like, well, I mean, technically that's not true in my specific situation, but we hadn't gone to that heart level of a conversation yet. And truthfully, she wouldn't have known that. And so, having that conversation with her, it was actually same day, and, it was open and honest, and truthfully, I think both of us walked away with a mutual respect for each other. But at the same time, knowing her heart, I knew that what she said didn't come from a place of malice. And, she really thought about it and said, I'm really sorry. I had no idea that, I was misrepresenting you, and that would never be, something that I would want to do. But I think just being willing to be bold, and those that say something that may strike a chord with you, and be prompt in that response, and be respectful and polite, and oftentimes the relationship will be better for it.
Absolutely. As I reflect on listening to this, one thing that I want to make everybody aware of, that is shared here, is that moment of pause where you give yourself time to think about how you want to react, right? How Debra and Stephanie raised it. And I feel that moment of pause has been needed so much through this pandemic, coming from a person who's very explosive and reactive, right? And through the years of working on it, you gotta give yourself that. And I've interpreted as grace, and I also call for empathy, because we have lots of room to grow, all of us. Unfortunately, for some of us, more for those who identify as Black and African American, there is already a lot of pain, and the fact that you have to do that even just adds more to it, right? But nonetheless, and not to speak for them, but for myself, you for the progress to be made, you have to find that space to pause and bring yourself to a place where you'll find growth together, right? Collaboration, and it'll be hard, right? I mean, which you do have two options, right? And I see you, Debra, also channeling the thoughts. So please feel free to jump in. But there is so much that we have to process, and giving yourself that grace to process and allowing yourself to practice those scenarios, I think is something that would serve you well.
Time. It takes time. It takes time to practice the grace. There comes a point, and there will come a point where you're always trying to be your authentic self. But you do have to give grace. And once you give, you have to give yourself grace. So a lot of times situations happen and we don't give ourselves the grace to react in that moment, in that situation. So understand that, yeah, you do have to have grace. It is painful. It is, it's like we were saying earlier, there's certain things that you don't have to identify. Certain things you can change, but there's certain things you cannot change. And the pain is one of the things that you can't change. You learn to live with it, and you don't have to accept it, but you do learn to live with it and deal with it. There will come a point in your career, at least for me it did. It came a point in my career where I was no longer afraid to bite my tongue. I wasn't worried about my paycheck. I wasn't worried about the next promotion, and I was free to handle things differently.
With any sorry, Debra.
No, go ahead.
With any difficult conversation, you need to practice. We know what they might be there, and what might be triggering or overwhelming for you. So you got to practice going in and practicing not only what you're going to say, but what you're not going to say, where you're not going to go. And another part about allyship is recognizing a difficult conversation or a comment that just kind of rolls right off of you can really be sticking with another person. That's your colleague, a student, whoever might be in your circle in that way, a client, whatever that might be. And so having the space to acknowledge that. And then I think we have a question later that talks about microaggressions. These things can build up over time. Something that seems as small as a mosquito bite could be deadly. It could have malaria. It could be that there's 15 mosquito bites on this person's arm that are invisible to you because you might not be experiencing it in the same way. And that could be because of your identity. It could be because of your personality and other kind of more interpersonal traits of your own. So yeah, I think there's, preparing and then keeping our allyship is about keeping that awareness, and then really trying to show up in our own self-care and being an accomplice to others.
Yep, you good, Debra? You're muted though. There you go.
Yes, I am good.
Yeah.
And I would say too that when you're an ally, before you speak on behalf of someone, go to that person and say, how did that make you feel? Because I read your body language to say thus. And if that's the case, because sometimes I would be in a room and I don't need you to speak for me. I needed to walk away from the situation. I'll address it later, but I needed to process it, or I needed to calm down and to determine how I'm going to handle that conversation. I appreciated it though, when colleagues would come to me and say, girl, I saw your face. How can I help? What can I do? And had the opportunity to have that one-on-one dialogue and then go in as a united front when we went to the next meeting or whatever. So just kind of put it in that perspective.
Thank you. So with that, let's segue to some of the suggestions you all might have to fellow fundraisers as far as understanding and relating to diverse communities that they're serving or they want to serve.
Personally, I think as fundraisers and fundraising professionals, whether you're on the front lines or more behind the scenes in an annual fund aspect, we should always be having conversations and getting to know the individuals that we are serving or stewarding their gifts or what the impact they want to have. If we don't have the knowledge and the understanding of them personally on a personal level, or that community personally on that personal level, how can we expect to really have an understanding of what we're doing, of what our role is meant to be in general? So that's just the number one general rule I would say, is just have that personal understanding and get to know them. Go in with no assumptions and get to know what you're doing.
I agree with you. I think back to an example, I know Gina Campbell, my former boss, is on from the Akron Canton Regional Food Bank. So hi, Gina. I had the pleasure of giving a tour to a group of students from Brazil. And I actually believe that they were from the University of Akron. And the typical tour at the food bank is roughly 20 minutes. And I vividly remember at the end of the conversation, again, when you take that time to really listen to understand and to build a relationship with someone, the young woman that was leading the tour, she came up to me afterwards and she said, okay, I just have to ask you. So you're telling me, and again, I threw all of this data, right? And, you know, she was nodding her head, but that aha light bulb moment, she came up to me and said, you're telling me that the people that give you money to help provide food to people in the community, they trust you with that money, and your government also gives you funding and money and food as well. And I said, yes. And she's like, really? And I never thought that that would actually be the one question that she had. And what I learned in that conversation was that in her country, there was such distrust from an individual's perspective and looking at the government. And she said, oftentimes, you know, if fundraisers come together and, you know, it's meant to be to feed someone, you never see that come to fruition. And so, you know, really learning from her in that moment, there was such a level of distrust in philanthropy as a whole based off of her country that she came from, I think was huge. And so I think depending on the community that you are looking to work with or engage with, I think educating yourself. Again, I thought it was an innocent tour of, you know, showing a group of college students, but I'm the one that walked away feeling more educated after the 20 minutes of understanding that I had no idea that that level of distrust had existed in the community in which they came from. And I think truthfully, I probably could have given a better tour had I thought to do my research in advance and really have the opportunity to, because again, that was one of 20 and she's the only one I was talking to. I might have had the opportunity to just share that good news with all 20.
I appreciate you sharing that example of cultural humility. You know, we use this idea of cultural competency, like you check it off and you're just good. But cultural humility is this process of being open and learning and then shifting our own worldview and behaviors, you know, in that way. So I'll speak specifically to the LGBTQ community. So I'm a lesbian and my pronouns are she, her. I'm cisgender. So that means I was assigned female at birth and I also identify as a woman, right? So a little bit of some terms that we use there. But so if you're trying to reach my community, there's a couple of different things that you know, they're simple to do. So communication is always effective. When we pronounce people's names right, you know, so we try. And when we make a mistake, you know, we're on it. We prep for those meetings. And then we have humility and grace when we make that mistake. So that happens across different cultural, for different cultural reasons, different languages, first language, second language. This also happens around pronouns. And you can't always guess someone's pronouns correctly because how we present our gender expression is informed personally and culturally. So, I introduce myself in meetings as she, her. And when we set that as a tone within our organization, you're going to make it more likely that just becomes a norm. Feels awkward at first, but it's going to make more effective and efficient communication. And for somebody who might be misgendered often, they get the wrong pronoun often, we're just going to lessen that for everybody and for that person. You can also put it in your signature lines. You can ask people their pronouns, you can share them. So there's some different techniques around that. And there's trainings that you can do. Plexus, we provide trainings. Canopy in Akron provides trainings to help you with the mechanics of this kind of communication that might not feel like a norm for you or organic and easy. And then also as fundraisers, junk in, junk out. So our databases are nightmares always. And we probably can't, a lot of times you might not be able to drop titles, add titles, but you can think about ways that you can have a process by which you could add someone's pronouns, thinking forward to how you might be mailing to me and my wife. I'm not like, she's not Mrs. Aaron Cole and kind of neither am I. So just use Aaron and Amanda Cole, or I like to be called Madame Amanda, or Queen, Duchess, all these things work for me. Mrs. doesn't. So you might just want to think about you might just want to think about the way that these formalities of politeness don't always carry across, but it can be tricky. So just spend some time thinking about those mechanics of language.
I mean, let me just jump in there real quick with you, Amanda, because I take my 3-year-old to karate, and there's, the formality is master so-and-so as they are, the black belts. And the teacher just insists on calling me Mrs., which my wife, who just, weirdly enough, can be very direct about those things. She had asked him to call him Miss, right? And she's like, I'm not González, I'm Wardell. Because then also they assume that because I'm the more masculine presenting person, that then she took my name. I'm like, no, I mean, we understand that you've been forced to think that way, but no, she's got her own last name. And to me, I have yet to tell him it is not Mrs., it's actually doctor, because it actually, to me, that there's like another layer there too. But I will put my intention for next week to get that done.
I mean, you can call me master, or you want master of the universe, Amanda Cole.
Right, there you go. Well, then that has a very bad connotation with slavery too.
That's that's very true. And yes, then Andrea dropped in a few more other organizations, Margie's Hope, Spectrum Diversity Community Center. They also offer trainings around LGBTQ, cultural humility, inclusivity and affirmation. Thanks for that, Andrea. It's hard to remember everybody off the top of my head, but you have a lot of resources here in the community for you.
Debra jumped in on this. What else say you? What other wisdom do you have for us, please?
No, I was going to say, I was looking at my notes, and so I have it on my iPad, so that's why I'm looking over this way. Is that to make sure that you admit what you don't know, don't make assumptions, ask questions, and for God's sake, be authentic and genuine when you're asking the questions, when you're having these conversations, and choose wisely where you have those conversations. Have it in a friendly, well, we used to be able to go to Starbucks, but just have it kind of in a relaxed atmosphere where it's not tense and people are not on edge. One of the things when you're starting to delve into these conversations, you want to be relaxed and you want people to be comfortable. It's already the conversation itself is already uncomfortable, but if we can physically be comfortable, I think that makes for a better conversation.
So here was what the universe was telling me as I was doing the elliptical at 5:30 in the morning in preparation for this. I was here to share, and I always try to come up with acronyms or alliterations so they stick. So the acronym that I came up with was HUG, but with an E. So HEG. And I shared with you already two of those, empathy and grace. The other one that has started this piece of the conversation is humility, right? So you brought it up, Amanda, as cultural humility, but just humility overall. I have been into too many of these webinars and seminars and Zoom things about diversity, equity, inclusion, racial justice, social justice, equity. And the thing that you start learning is that there's many people out there that think they know what they know and they don't know. And so I have to stress how this word humility has really come into play as well, because as they were saying, it's like you gotta realize what it is that you don't know, right, Stephanie? I mean, you're like, you know what? I didn't know. I could have done something better had I, addressed things differently. And to me, it has been of, that dialectic Socratic method, right? I mean, learn from others. And I understand that there's much to learn, that there's things that you don't understand yet. And coming with that humility mind frame, I think allows you to absorb things much faster and to also show that compassion, right? And to feel more authentic to others, right? In your learning as well, versus like, oh, I'm just here to learn. Tell me all about it. And when you have with these preconceptions, open yourself up. Tell me, Debra. You mute yourself, but you shouldn't. Come on, I need that back and forth. I see you.
It's a dialogue. It's not a monologue. You're having these dialogues with each other because you learn a lot. I mean, when you get to know people, you learn things. And that's important. One of the questions that they asked us was, what would you tell your smarter self? And I said, stay current, read and study, keep feeding your soul and your mind, and engage in regular self-care. Well, keep reading. I always come with a reading list, y'all. So I did bring you a reading list today. But just things
Pam Hickson would appreciate it. Just go ahead and share it.
So not all reading lists, not everything that I do in a reading list is about fundraising. So now these are more geared toward this. I'm in this genre right now of cultural awareness. So one of them is a long time coming by Michael Eric Dyson. Finding My Voice by Valerie Jarrett. The Beauty of What Remains by Steve Linder. Emotional Intelligence in the Workplace by Mark Kramer. Choosing Your Perspective, and that's 7 tips on high performance through intentional thinking by John Martin. And then Executive Presence, the missing link between merit and success. And then Own the Room. And then Harness the Power of Personal Branding and Executive Presence. So that's kind of where I am this week. So these are current books that I am reading. And I'm also reading Howard Thurman, who is a noted African-American theologian. And he had a book that he wrote back in the 1930s called Jesus and the Disinherited.
Debra, could you send that list to me by email when we're done, and I will send it to the group.
Okay.
So they don't have to like frequently keep writing and, oh my God, I missed one. Thank you.
All right. So now that
I've done that, so you guys got it.
Sounds good. Thanks, Debra. Now that I got us warmed up, let me go to the heart of it. Do you think fundraising reflects and magnifies racial hierarchies in the nonprofit world? Why or why not?
Yes, it does. Because of some assumptions that are made or have been made over the years. One is that the African-American community is a consumer and not a philanthropist. And so a lot of folks work from that premise, and that's why they've ignored that community for so long. And I think it's probably the same way with other minority groups, that there is this, because of the way we interpret philanthropy. But really and truly, if you look at those communities, philanthropy has always been a major part of it. They would not have survived without philanthropy. It's just not called philanthropy. The lens to which they look at that is survival and what we do, and it says we all rise together. So, you know, it's only in our predominantly white areas, serving institutions, that we make these assumptions that all Black kids are coming on scholarships, you know, so they're consumers. And what we forget is that once they've graduated, they go on to successful careers, and we forget to tap back into them as now being in a position of ones who can do philanthropy. Every Sunday, folks do philanthropy, and philanthropy in the Black community has always been, in August, when the kids were getting ready to go back to school, a lot of times pastors would call the kids to the front that were going off to college and give them a collection plate. And everybody in the church would walk by and put $1 or $2 in it to send them, that helped them get back to school. John Lewis tells a wonderful story about what happened to him as a student getting ready to go to Fisk University, and how his church gave him money to get his bus ticket and things like that. So philanthropy has always been a part of the community. The killing of, sharing of food, harvesting of crops together, working. One day they were at John Smith's farm, and the next day they were over at Henry Jones's farm, working together to lift the community. So philanthropy is ingrained. It was just not called philanthropy. So, and I think that, and once you learn the culture, you'll learn that. Hispanics have what's important to the community. You got to know that. And in the Hispanic community, there is also ingrained philanthropy is just not called that.
We just make tamales and sell them at the church. I mean, it is honest, you know. I'm not trying to be facetious here, but you know, somebody had a cry for help.
Right.
The ladies went.
Right. Somebody needed rent money, so you had rent parties. Somebody needed a shoes or whatever it was. Folks found a way to get whatever was needed within the community. For the longest period of time, African American children never were part of the system. Our kids didn't get adopted out. Our kids didn't get put on trains and sent across the country. We took care of our kids in our own community. That was philanthropy. That was taking care of our community. So it's how you, it's the lens to which you look at it. And so I advise folks, clean your lens. Clean your lens.
Kasey, Amanda, Stephanie, what you got?
Just going to echo those remarks. I think even just sharing a bit of a personal story. I love her to pieces because she's my aunt, and I know that she would be totally fine with me telling this story. But, you know, looking at my mom and how my mom came to this country, and this is kind of jumping into a different question, but I'll come back, I promise. Many people assume that, you know, having a Korean mother means that my father served in the military, and the only way that my mom would have gotten here is if she married an American soldier. And that's actually not the case. And again, I'm 100% in support of our military, but my parents are actually high school sweethearts. But many people, again, like Debra said, make assumptions that that's the only way that, you know, a Korean woman could marry a white male, as if, you know, he served overseas. But interestingly, my mom came here because her oldest sister realized that my mom's fate after becoming orphaned at the age of 10 was in, and again, this sounds like 200 years ago, but it was 50 years ago, her fate was either to be sold into slavery or prostitution in South Korea as an orphaned 10-year-old. And my aunt, who is 17 years older than my mom, living in this country, found out about my mom's situation, adopted my mom, and brought my mom here. And again, as philanthropy looks different for everyone, I don't know if there's any greater act of love and sacrifice and service than, to adopt someone who, again, biologically, she's my aunt, legally, she's my grandma, which is kind of fun that she could have either title. But for her to be willing to, come alongside a 10-year-old, I mean, I can't even imagine, not knowing what my future would look like. Me having the ability to sit in this chair is because of that major act of kindness and that my aunt showed to my mom. And what's funny is you would actually have a conversation with my aunt, and if you didn't know this backstory, you'd be like, wow, she's really stingy. She's not a super generous person. But if you actually got a chance to know her and realize that behind the scenes, incredibly charitable in ways that are meaningful to her, you would really recognize that, there are so many people's lives, including myself, who, the trajectory of their life was forever changed because of that. And so I think, again, that's just one example that's extremely obviously personal to me. But there's, thousands of those stories in and across the communities that we all live, work, and play in. And I think, to Debra's point, just having the opportunity to educate yourself and to really lean in and listen. Because if you're willing, to sit and actually, I know it's hard, I like to, but if you can keep your mouth shut and just listen sometimes, the things that you will learn. And when people feel like you have that authentic, open heart to really listen, to understand, and not just listening out of courtesy, I think it'll really help a lot.
Kasey, you want to go and then I can follow you? Or not?
Sorry, I'm trying to find the
Give him a
unmute
minute,
button on
Amanda.
here.
Come on.
Remember
Y'all
how we
see how
talked
this
about
runs in my family too. My poor wife and son. They're like,
Cristina was talking about cracking the whip earlier. Gosh, it's spread now. I think on this subject in particular, on how it does philanthropy magnify and reflect the racial hierarchies that exist in our society? Well, I mean, the easy answer for that isn't obviously. The racial hierarchies exist within our society. We build everything within our society off of what already exists, because that ingrains assumptions, that ingrains institutions, that ingrains individuals, that it ingrains everything that we look at. So if you think that it doesn't, I think we should probably look back at some of the historical contexts with each other once in a while. I was a history major. I can help show you some of that, but really understanding that, no, it doesn't go away just because some social aspects have changed, and there are plenty that have, there are plenty that haven't. But of course, our society was for 200 something years in the United States reflected and completely based off of racial hierarchy. So there's, in the last 50 years, no, it hasn't gone away. We've built our entire lives around it. So that's the easy answer I can give.
1619, right? That's where that goes, and even before that, right? So I think that we are having greater conversations around equity. And so I think the practice of building a diverse pipeline for our boards, for our volunteers, and for our colleagues is critically important. Very seldom as fundraisers are we going at it alone. A lot of times it has to do with our boards and our event committee and our chairs of those committees. And what does that look like? And then also believe people when they tell you there's a certain tone or word to use or not use, or a cause that their community is going to care about. Believe them in that. Somebody put into the chat to really look at it from an asset-based approach. Usually, always, when there is a social ill, an oppression, a challenge, those of us who are living and surviving through that, we also have the solutions. So how do we solution build with folks? And then lastly, I think about philanthropy, the way that it shores up in our foundation institutions. So I think foundations are doing a good look at this also. So for instance, the Cleveland Foundation has the Black Fund, and that's not only what I love about this new fund is, and I had to explain this to somebody recently, they were like, oh, well, we serve a predominantly African-American community, so we should apply for funds there. This fund seeks to support Black-led and Black-serving organizations. And so when we want to think about that and how we can put money, resources, relationships back into the communities, into the assets, into the leadership, that makes a huge difference. And so it also goes back to what Debra said too, you know, when we're showing up as an ally, what we really want to do is be an accomplice. So know when to get in the way and when to get out of the way, you know, and like who you bring along with you, you know, and also this goes back to mentorship. What young interns are, or not young, but what intern or fellow, should be ageist, are you having lunch with? And who are you not? And why is that happening? And, you know, just, it's okay. We have bias. Check it, move on with it. No Catholic guilt needed here because it doesn't help anybody change their behavior. So I guess those are my things I think about on the individual level and then also the broader institutional level.
And, you know, Amanda, with, you know, we know language matters. My dear friend, Veronica Sims, when I used accomplice as well, she didn't take well to that one because she's like, that implies negativity. You know, we do have that word and I understand it. And I'm like, but you gotta accomplice, right? You gotta be right there and get in it with it. So I think, you know, for those of you who might find that troubling is taking the risk, is, you know, making sure that you are there with the person that you're willing to speak up for, that you're willing to lose power, right? That is what we mean by accomplice, that you're willing to risk your power in order to raise the other person. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of what we mean by that.
Yeah. Yeah, and reclaiming that word, yeah, it has like this criminal tone to it, but reclaim it. And I'm failing to remember the Indigenous leader, she's Aboriginal, and she said, if you're here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you're here recognizing that our liberation is intimately tied, then I'm here to work with you. You know, I'm mashing it up and I'll have to look up her name and I'm sorry that I'm forgetting it. But this idea that if you're here to be in it with me, like racism benefits and privileges me as a white person, but it is destroying me as a white person, right? Like it is not good for any of us, even if there's power and privilege that come with it. So when I want to undo that and within myself and within my community, then we're all going to get more free together. And you can apply that to other identity groups around age, ability, you know, gender identity, etc.
Tell us more, Stephanie, about investor.
So I think that goes back to, again, how sometimes accomplice can have a negative connotation, but if you're investing in something, you've got skin in the game. And, you know, whether it's financially or, you know, figuratively in this, you know, scenario, you know, if someone doesn't want you to just stand beside them, they want you to get in the trenches as well, and be part of that. And I think that, you know, for me, I like investor because again, you know, I think we all look at when we invest something, whether it's our time or our resources, that, you know, again, we don't typically give that over without having thought behind it, where it's not new free for all and we just invest in everything or everyone would get burnt out. And so I think being very intentional in, you know, being invested in someone's situation and how we can better that with them, I think is what I mean when I talk about investor being another term to use with accomplice.
And I think the person who's invested speaks very much like a sponsor. You speak when that person's not in the room. And sometimes conversations and things happen when the people involved are not in the room. And so I look at that as an opportunity for someone who's invested to speak to power when I'm not there to say, so they, you know, they're not making a show of it because I'm there, but they're doing it when I'm not there. I think that's important, that we speak for people when they're not in the room.
Absolutely. All right, I want to leave a lot of time for questions here. So let's close with this for our, you know, scheduled panel. What is working for you guys, or what has worked in your development positions? And what are some of those tidbits that you want to share with everybody on the call?
What works? Well, what has worked is to constantly educate myself, to be well-rounded, as a development officer, it's really important that you are aware of current trends. that you are, if you're dealing with the business community, that you're aware of what's going on in the community. The worst thing you can do is go in and ask the company for $20,000 and they're in the process of filing for bankruptcy. So I think you need to be aware, that's really important of that. And you need to be aware, you need to be up to date on terminology and the language that we're using. Just like using the pronouns and things of that sort. That's important. You need to know those things. So I'd say stay current, stay involved.
Thank you, Debra.
And I would say stay accessible as well. I know that, again, earlier Debra had shared that, oftentimes you might forget that, it is possible for, an African-American student to go on and become successful. And, it happens all the time, but don't, count anyone out and, be accessible. And, for me, I talk about the alumni relations world as really trying to bridge the gap between where someone is and where they want to be. And, I think that it happens oftentimes as fundraisers, we know where we want to go, but how do we meet someone where they are? And what does that bridge look like? Because it's not the same for everyone. And, I think even in having conversations and having allies on campus, it's very common that alumni have stronger relationships with individuals like professors. I know myself being an alum of Walsh, many of my strongest relationships resided with the professors and not the alumni office, and that's okay. And so, having the ability to be accessible and be a part of a conversation if invited, to, say, hey, this specific audience really wants to connect in this space. How can you help us get there? And be willing to go there with them. And to never, count out a population, but at the same time, make sure that, if you're willing to be that investor in that space, that you make the time to when called upon.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Speaking from an aspect of running, I used to, when I was with Pride Kent and the LGBTQ Student Center at Kent State University, I would help run the ally trainings and things of that nature. And I think one of the best things that we can incorporate as well, as far as what works, is taking down your own defenses, taking down your own walls, because I've put my foot in my mouth plenty of times. I've said things that I shouldn't have said, and I have learned through them. But how did I learn through them and become a better person and a better fundraiser through them? When somebody called me out on it, I didn't get angry. I didn't instantly become defensive about it. Okay, well, tell me more. Explain, I don't understand. If I did understand, then okay, I see. But if I don't understand what I did wrong, ask about it. So be willing to learn, be open, and take down your defenses, because if you're angry, you're not going to learn anything, and that relationship's just going to get worse. So that's the number one thing that I can say that has worked for me, is just don't get defensive, be willing to learn and open yourself up to those critiques.
And if you find yourself there, thank you also works,
Yeah, always say thank you when somebody's willing to teach you something.
Yes, it took courage.
Yeah. What is it? It's acknowledge, validate, and then educate. So, acknowledge, thank you for correcting me. Validate, I'm going to really work on this. And educate doesn't mean that you just keep on asking that person why they felt something was some type of way. Whatnot.
We're not Google.
Yeah. So I think I'm just going to keep on coming back to my board. Being an executive director of a small organization, I do get to be in the boardroom in a way that I wasn't always able to as a development director. But the way that we can work with our boards and our committees to do JEDI work, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and integrate it into all that we do. So my board is amazing, and we've known that we are a predominantly white board, white staff, and white organization in our membership. And that's a problem. And so we've slowed down. We're not filling seats on our board. We're filling out our pipeline. We're holding conversations, coffee conversations, focus groups to say, what's going on here? Why are you not coming to Plexus? What do we need to hear about ourselves? And then we also have an education committee that integrates that JEDI work into the board. It can be as simple as, tracking our learning hours and putting that into our board expectations. Our board expectation is that there's 2 Jedi related trainings that the board will go through together, and that you will attend a minimum of 5 community events that have something to do with Jedi work. And that is considered professional development, and we track it. And we're gonna continue to fine tune that metric as how we hold ourselves accountable. And then we're taking the YWCA 21-day challenge, right? We're gonna publicly do that, but we're also gonna do it as a board. We're setting up buddies and having conversation. That's not the end all be all. And we're in this time where equity at an organizational level, how to do an equity audit, how to do this work is like, you can Google it and you're gonna hit it so much more easily than 5-10 years ago, where maybe we were having to build this on our own, or we were having to be the lone voice that said, yo, we need to really think about identity and what we're doing. And I think that just makes a healthier organization. It makes us more responsive and dynamic. It brings better programming, and it's around those relationship building. Those partnerships are going to be more meaningful. I always say, like, I have to show up at other people's events, which has been harder, but how can I do that? If I want the Hispanic Business Center to partner with me because they're an amazing business resource development, well, I need to be going to their events. I need to volunteer. I need to bring some food to the potluck. That's what I need to do. And so that's what we have to do across differences all the time. We have to ask to be invited and show up when people open the door for us.
Like literally bring food though.
Literally bring food.
Literally bring food to the Hispanics.
I mean,
again,
also
very food-based culture that we have.
I grew up in a trailer park, extremely food-based culture from where I am from also. Like, poor white people, we are about some free food. Okay,
always
I didn't know
free food.
I still
that it
don't
was
pass on
being
those.
delivered. I thought it was Santa Claus that brought me that free cheese and cereal every month. I was excited. I'm just saying.
All right, friends. I want to open up the space for any questions that are burning in people's minds. Please also use the chat. I want to honor introverts who do not want to speak up, and so I see you. My wife is one, so I'm learning. so please either share them with us and I'll read them, and if you want to remain anonymous, you can send them directly to me and I can bring it up anonymously.
Christine, I do have a question that would incorporate all of us, in that I find that I have challenges when I go to reach out to an organization such as an Asian organization or others. They don't return my call, just to get them to become a member of AFP NEO. They don't return my calls. I find that sometimes, specifically cultural organizations, are maybe reluctant to get involved. I don't know. How do you tap into the Jewish community? How do you tap into, who do you reach out to LGBTQ? And get a response? Who do you reach out to the Asian community? We're trying to make our boards more diverse, but yet it's difficult for us to get to the right people that'll respond to us and say, wow, that's awesome. Yeah, we would love to be part of you, and so can you help me there?
Well, part of it is that there's not an awareness of the organization in the community. And that's one of the things that you have to deal with, is people knowing your organization. It's one thing to make a phone call. It's another thing, what has your presence been in that community prior? And I think you have to look at that. Definitely. I always tell people, what's your reputation on the street? Do you know what it is? And you need to know that. And AFP may have a reputation of being a predominantly white organization that serve, and because of the cost of being a membership, it may have a reputation of being elitist or something that's not attainable to. Yeah, you got it, Amanda. So it's the money, and so if I've got to spend money for AFP, that kind of money, it can be, sir, I can use that money in my community. So the value, AFP may not be showing its value to me in my community. Does that help you?
Well, I think it does. And a couple other things, I mean, from a couple other boxes that I do check, right? One of those being the millennial one. I'm not going to return a call to you, Cynthia. I'm sorry. Like, I just, email me. It'll take me a week. I mean, I still have a voice, my phone at work still blinking. I'm afraid John's going to go by it. It's like, why is she never responding to voicemail? But I just don't. I have on my voicemail, email me for a faster response. So a few things of, how do you communicate, as well as Debra was saying, like, there might not be an understanding of what's in it for them, right? In with fee-based membership too, like as a business person, I'm never going to be the General Akron Chamber as of right now, because I mean the Greater Akron Chamber, because it costs a lot of money as a business, and so then they wonder why there's no diverse caterers per se. Well, then I learned that you got to be a member of the chamber if you want to get in on the game to be considered for catering, right? Well, but as a minority business, like, I can't afford that membership, right? Which is why we'll join Plexus, Amanda, eventually, but that's another story. And so these things, right? So these preconceptions of, we're reaching out to you because it'll be good for you. Yeah. Why don't you come to my door, right, and share with me what it is that you see us bringing to the table? What are you going to gain from us, and what's that exchange, right? I mean, a little bit of that. Amanda, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, Plexus, we have an education foundation, which is where we run our curriculum and our training, and ERG support, employee resource group support, but we're a membership organization. So I feel you. I mean, our partnerships are really important. I look to partner with affinity and mission aligned businesses and offer those discounts, offer co-hosted programming, providing free ways to get in. I think one of the beautiful things about this pandemic is that I've attended more AFP, not only because I've been on the panel, because it's been a little bit easier to get in, right? And that it's an easier access point. So I think we need to think about those things. Also, like, if we have people within the fold of our organization, this is what we're doing at Plexus. Why are you here? So for instance, you're an African-American gay man. You're very involved with Plexus. Why are you showing up? What works for you? Okay. And I'm not going to ask you to explain everything to me, but what is working for you? And then also, can you broker some conversations, some listening sessions for me? Right. And then also, where do you go? Asking those other fundraisers, what is it that you need from us? Mm-hmm. I think that matters. I don't know, I'm rambling on, but I'm excited. I'm going to, on the record, Cristina is joining Plexus. So exciting. So exciting.
I want to hold some space for Jackie, who said that she had a response to your story, Amanda. Please, Jackie, go ahead.
Okay. This is sort of outside the box, but Amanda, you were talking about people bringing cheese and cereal, every month. I remember, I grew up really, really poor. And my mom, was divorced. She raised 3 kids on minimum wage, which back then was like $3, One Christmas, men from our church brought this huge box of food. And she bawled for 2 hours. She cried so hard because she realized people saw her as poor. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking that's a preconception, as Cristina was saying. You think that poor people want food and they'll be grateful. And she was humiliated instead. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's important that if you go and reach out to people, first of all, just don't give people, food because they're poor. They have to demonstrate that they want it. But second of all, she would have been more proud and more engaged if they had asked her to fill the food baskets of, that they were developing. She didn't want one, she wanted to help. And when you're thinking about your board, about getting diversity, think about people. I mean, your board doesn't have to be full of donors, okay? But getting people, your clients on the board, will be a lot more productive. I think you'll be very surprised at how much they can offer.
Yeah, get them on the board, seat at the table is great. Are they getting the same meal as everybody else? Or is their input just as valid? And my family does not like that I talk about growing up needing assistance, growing up
Right.
working class and growing up poor. But to me, it's been a really important analysis about class and about this invisibility that can happen around class. And for me, I'm middle class now, but I'm always informed back to that 100%. So my mother is probably dying when she realizes that I'm talking about getting kicks and government cheese on a panel. But here's the fact of the matter. I'm going to be vulnerable about that. I'm going to be open about it. And I'll be damned if I'm going to be embarrassed about where I come from. And I think that's what we're talking about, is how as organizations, as fundraisers, do we show up? Do we listen? Do we have cultural humility? Do we check our biases? Because we don't want we want people to celebrate everything that they are, everything that comes with their culture, their social culture, their external culture, all this different stuff. I appreciate you sharing that, Jackie.
And I think just adding to Cynthia's question, just thinking about a different way to outside of the phone or even email, that could be a creative way to try to connect with whoever the stakeholder is in the different groups that you're trying to connect with. And so, maybe it's a little box that you mail them that, has information on AFP, and, they can be self-informed, and maybe there's a $5 Starbucks gift card with an invitation to join a, coffee and chat with you at a specific time. And, have a, now that you've gotten a chance to get to know us, we'd love to get a chance to get to know you. And at the end of the day, if they don't show up and, they get coffee for themselves, then if they don't know anything about you before, at least, they would know a little bit more about, AFP. And, in that scenario, if they didn't show, it would be just a random act of kindness of, you thinking of them and trying to connect with them in a different way. And again, I think shipping could probably be really inexpensive, and I think everybody has their own coffee cup and doesn't really need another one. So give them the opportunity to get coffee out and treat themselves and get a chance to get FaceTime with you. I think we're always trying to think outside the box of how to connect with folks in different ways. That might be a good way.
So here's another question that was shared, and I actually heard this as an issue in another board meeting that I was at yesterday. Individuals wanting to give to organizations that do more direct services than, say, an organization that does maybe more systems work. How do we manage, especially those of communities of color, or the LGBTQI plus community? How do we manage their values? How do we speak to those in order to try to pull in some of that money? What works there? Anybody? Come on. There you go, Debra.
That's a tough one, because you really have to, okay, so you're looking at what they're doing, and then you got to try to look introspectively at yourself and try to find those things that where you can align. And sometimes it may be that you don't directly align, but maybe there's a organization you can partner with. And so you collaborate. So I think you look for collaborations. You look at, sometimes you don't have to start a new program. Sometimes it's the way you frame what you're currently doing to make yourself align better. I mean, we just went through this yesterday at our board meeting I'm sitting on a major nonprofit here's board, and they're already doing some of the D&I work. It's just that the way that they frame it, you wouldn't know it. So I think it's how you're messaging yourself. And I think you can align with it that way. And then, like I said, partnerships.
And is the question how to find these smaller direct service organizations and support them philanthropically? Was that?
No, it's more to the individual donor that you are, courting, I guess.
Okay.
How might they
make your case?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How you frame your case. Yeah.
And you can
tricky. Yeah.
Did it come to you? I was gonna say we can always like.
Oh
you
yeah,
know, go
y'all
back
just
and-
saw my thinking face
Mhm.
publicly. The thinking face just happened. Sorry, y'all.
Yes, yeah, because we got 7 minutes left, so we can always respond back that in an email and share it out if that's
Yeah.
possible.
That's a definite, let me think about that a little bit more. Yeah,
That one's a bigger
I mean-
question than it seems on the surface.
it does. It is because
And I think some of it does link back to, like I said, the knowing of what the person really wants, right? What are the values? Like they might give to the food bank because, everybody needs to be fed, right? And that's something that is easy for them. But in a conversation, can we make them think deeper about what it truly is that connects with them, right? And how it is that the service that you are providing to that community might align with some of those values. They might not see it at first, but we can, I think, help them, right? It's partnerships, but also storytelling, right? I used to tell this to my nonprofits when I was at SEI. It's how do we best tell your story through data in that case, right? In this case, it might be how do you best tell your story, period, so that you can bring in that money. I mean, I saw that there was great success now for some organizations with the pandemic and, transforming their fundraising techniques, right? Which, they kind of became more accessible. Again, you probably nailed a bunch of the introverts that didn't want to go to the wine and dine, groups, and then just dreaded those 2 hours of just sitting there and, listening to somebody speak, like, and having to have a drink with somebody at a table with somebody else. Like, oh, let me just click and I will shop that and I will take a bid, right? Like we actually reduced a lot of barriers to access, right? You didn't have to dress up something fancy. You didn't have to do X, Y, or Z, find the ride, find the sitter, like, right? Were we thinking about these things beforehand, right? No, we were just thinking about throwing the nicest party in town. Debra, what you got?
I was looking at it, I was thinking about it. It speaks to agility and impact. That you as an organization, we've been talking about having to pivot, but I think it also goes to maybe agility is a better word than just the pivot. That we as organizations, we really need to have the flexibility and the ability to be agile and to change our approach, or to have a multi-layered approach, multi avenues of engagement. I think that we have a tendency to want to be one size fits all, and one size doesn't fit all. And
Exactly.
you've got organizations that 80% of their funding is from corporates and foundations. They're going to suffer because they haven't developed the individual. And now they're trying to get on that individual train, and that train is almost out of the station and down the road. So I think that we have to have that agility and impact. Okay, so shameless plug, y'all.
Here we go.
Those of you that belong to Case in January probably received your issue of Currents magazine. I'm quoted in there a whole lot.
All right. All right.
On the D&I, on diversity and inclusion. But so there's that. Also, because we only have a few more minutes,
Right.
we have started, as you know, I'm the chair of the board for AADO, the African American Development Officers Network. We have started a group called Men of Color in Development. So if you've got fundraisers who are men of color, on February the 24th at 2:30, they'll be having a meeting, and you can inbox me for more information about that. Women of Color, Woke, is also doing on February 24th. They're at 3 o'clock. They're having an event, and theirs is on the perception of Black representation in fundraising and philanthropy. So there's some things that are coming up. I think it's important that that you, again, like I said, educate yourself, get yourself into situations where you're learning. You don't know what you don't know.
You got it.
And
Thank
when
you,
know
Debra, so much.
You do better.
Before people start leaving, I'd like to let you know that I have recorded this video. I will send it to everyone who registered. Also, I've created a start of discussion on our Facebook page, the AFP Facebook page. We've got some really excellent points, and I want to keep the conversation going. So in your email that I'll send after the video is processed is a link to our Facebook page, so you can start telling your stories, ask questions, share with others, you know, what you're experiencing, what you're feeling. And I don't want this conversation to end. I think it's been so awesome that would be a disservice to everyone if we did.
And I dropped a link to, you know, I always have to share something useful. So I dropped a nice link to a blog post that I thought put diversity, equity, inclusion into very manageable tidbits there. They equated them to gardening. So feel free to learn a little bit more there. And also my LinkedIn, if anybody else wants to share their profile, feel free to drop your LinkedIn profile link. and we'll have those there. Thank you so very much to everybody that was here, everybody that stayed engaged. As always, you know, we ran out of time, and I thought we had given enough time to the conversation back and forth, and I welcome that the questions were raised. With that, I mean, if anybody else has anything in mind, we'll close.
I just want to thank you so much. You did an excellent job as moderator, and the panelists, excellent. Man, talk about food for thought. I'm going to put some hot sauce on all this food.
Done. Done. Drop that mic.
I do have to try your what is it?
Not your daddy's, because it's my daddy's recipe, not yours.
Okay.
Shameless plug, right, Debra? Shameless plug.
Not Yo Daddy's Mexican hot sauce.
Yes, that's it.
It's the best, the best, the best.
Where do you get it?
We get at Nom's over at the Northside Marketplace and at Leaf Home and Blooms.
Okay, very
good. And the River Merchant, actually, if you're in Kent. Okay, there you go, Kasey.
Okay.
When you go to church. Eventually.
Love the River Merchant. Didn't know it was there.
It is there.
Thank you, everybody. It was very, very excellent webinar, and I really appreciate everybody's transparency and input. Thank you so much.
Till next time.
Yeah. Do we have to have a part 3?
Thanks, everybody.
Always leave them wanting more, right?
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
Well done. Well done.
It was good to see you all again.
Yeah.
I hope to meet you all in person someday. It'd be great.
Likewise.
Yes.
I
It'll
think
be weird when that's normal again.
Right.
Excellent.
Man, I think I thought I sent her an email back, but your wife reached out to me after the panel, I think, and I thought I emailed her back, and I never heard back from her. But it's possible that my email never sent.
Well, you know, she doesn't. She's not a Scorpio, so if you had done that to me, I would have you on a list, and I would be like, oh. So she's a Pisces. We'll just get together with you. But I love that she reached out to you.
Yes, I did too. All right. Thank you. I think it went all right.
You did great.
Well done.
So
Well
much.
done. Thank you all.
Everybody have a good day and be safe in the snow.
And stay safe and warm.
Bye, y'all.
God.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.